Picture this. You figure out a unique way to make a lot of money. So much money that you're able to put away a good amount of it each time you get paid. And over the years, you amass a huge fortune. You've made so much that you end up hiding it in multiple cases all around your property because you just have too much money. Well, one day, a war breaks out between opposing beliefs within your own country. And because of this, you're walking on eggshells around everybody. You try to appease both sides of the war, but eventually, one of them hears about your cases and they confront you. They back you up against the wall and beat the fudge out of you until your significant other comes to your rescue and gives away the location of one of your hidden cases. And when they open it, they find a portion of the gold and silver you've been collecting over the years of constant hard work. Well, you figure it's all said and done now. They took what they wanted, but after they spent all their stolen loot, they come back. You see, that's part of the story of what happened to Henry Nunez and his lost treasure, which is also why if you ever find yourself near the Perdido River, take a minute and just look around, because you may end up stumbling upon $3.4 million, depending on when this hoard of 100 grand was actually counted. This could be lower or higher, but hey, $1 million is still $1 million. There are a lot of treasures hidden throughout the United States of America, so much so I'm actually working on a video of each state with their respective treasures. And Henry Nunez's lost treasure is said to be somewhere near the border of Alabama and Florida. But before you go out with your prospecting gear that you just bought on Amazon, let's talk about who Henry Nunez was and how his treasure came about. Also, at the end of this, I'm going to give you some coordinates that are believed to be where his treasure is hidden, so be sure to stick around. It's through the events of the past that we can better learn and shape the actions of our future. During the rainy season, the Perdido River was known to rapidly rise and then slowly fall, and a young man saw this as a unique opportunity. The river was quite an inconvenience to travelers, and their inconvenience would come to be Henry Nunez's money-making opportunity. So he formed what was called the Henry Nunez Ferry, and this was the only way to cross the river for miles, at least without wading through the water and getting soaked. And his ferry business was very popular as a passage from Pensacola and Mobile in Baldwin County. The total trip took around 12 hours for about 60 miles, which in those days was not bad considering you would be crossing over the water in a place that you'd otherwise be half submerged in the water to make the same trip in much more time. Throughout his years of operating his own ferry system, he allegedly made quite a bit of money, and he made it in the form of silver and gold. And according to the legend of who he was as a person, he was a man of simple needs. He didn't buy fancy clothes, jewelry, or a brand new iPhone. So over the years, he ended up stashing away all of the gold and silver he had amassed and buried them in wine casks on the grounds of his home. And the reason he buried it is potentially because of his past as a pirate. It's legend that he was part of Jean Lafitte's pirate crew, who was quite a notable pirate in his own regard, and has legends of his own treasure elsewhere. It doesn't actually have anything to do with Henry Nunez, but it kinda adds a bit of credence to the whole story. So if Henry Nunez was a part of a pirate crew that has legends of their own buried treasure, then he also has a legend of his treasure being hidden, then it's almost as if these two legends somewhat corroborate one another. So this whole ferry business wasn't going on for just a couple of years or even a couple of decades, but Henry Nunez worked on his ferry for about 47 years. Imagine if you could put away 10, 20, or even 50% of what you made for 47 years and how much you'd have by the end of it. And assuming that Henry Nunez wasn't a man who loved material items, it's very possible that he did indeed save a large part of what he made. He continued his work all the way into the Civil War, and despite him having his own opinions and beliefs about the war, he chose to accommodate both the Confederate and the Union. He did this in the hopes that he'd be left alone to keep working and keep making money. He even did this for both the North and South, even when they chose not to pay him. And this is when the story takes a turn for the worst. The secret of his fortune and how he buried multiple casks was revealed to troops that were occupying the area. And at first, the Union troops asked Henry Nunez to share a portion of his wealth, but he wasn't having it. He worked every single day for every single coin he had, and he earned it honestly too. He wasn't about to give up all of that he had been working for just to a group of bullies. So what the soldiers did was they strung him up to a tree and began lashing him, but he refused to give up his fortune. However, his wife had decided that her husband's life was more important than the money, and she led the soldiers to one of the casks. The men took everything from the cask and spent their money on the things that bad men tend to spend their money on. Or at least that's how the story goes. I'll let you use your imagination on what you think they did with Henry's money. But the way things usually happen is when you get a lot of money very quickly, you tend to spend and lose it very quickly. So After a little while, the Union soldiers went back to Henry for another cask of gold and silver. Only this time they began beating Henry much more severely, and again, he was saved by his wife. But this time, Henry wouldn't go on to make a full recovery because Henry Nunez wasn't a young man. He had been working on his ferry for 47 years, and if he had started this at the age of 13, he would have been 60 years old when these Union soldiers attacked him, but he was probably much older. After the soldiers took Henry's second cask, they moved on to another encampment not long after Henry Nunez died, as a result of the beating he took. History often depicts things as being black and white. These are the good guys and these are the bad guys, but that's not how it is in real life. In real life, our heroes are human and flawed, and it's up to every single one of us as individuals to keep the monsters within ourselves at bay. Had these men not acted like animals, then maybe Henry would have had a different legacy. Henry ended up getting pneumonia and passing away, leaving his wife old and alone. So she sold the ferry and the house they lived in, and she retired in Georgia to live with some of her relatives. But there's nothing anywhere that says Henry Nunez only had 2 casks. After all, he was saving his money for 47 years, so there's no telling how long it took him to fill them with gold and silver. The story goes on to say that he saved around $100,000 throughout his life, and if you adjust this for inflation, that would mean it's equal to around $1.9 million to $3.4 million, depending on when this 100 grand was counted. You too could move out of your state and retire if you managed to find Henry Nunez's lost treasure, assuming his wife didn't take it with her. His ferry continued being worked from 1815 to 1919. And while the exact location of his ferry and home are still up for debate, there are some local treasure hunters that claim it to be around these coordinates, near present-day US Highway 90 bridge. So now you too can go in search of Henry Nunez's lost treasure, but just make sure you obey all the laws and you're not doing anything that you're not supposed to. But if treasure hunting isn't something that you're into, then check out this video here that YouTube seems to think you'll love, and I'll see you there.